Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fingerprints of Greif podcast. It is almost the last day of March and Good Friday today. So we have a part 2 of our show from last week with Al and Heide. So Alan, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To the show. And one of the things that we talk about on our podcast is I had somebody ask me today about my podcast, and they go, "Oh my gosh, is it depressing? Is it sad?" And I said, I don't think so. I don't think that it is. I said, I think that the whole objective in wanting to bring this to fruition is that we need to talk about grief. We need to talk about our feelings around pretty much everything in life. It's healthy to talk about your feelings. But the one thing about grief is, you say there's 5 stages. I mean, I personally think, yes, there are 5 stages, but I don't think there's a 6th stage, which is the forever,
Yeah.
and the acceptance kind of in the 5th stage and coming to peace with it, but it never goes away.
No.
There's always going to be triggers. So today at 1:52 a.m., my beautiful mother, so 10 years ago today, I was in the Denison Medical Center in Denison, Texas. Mom had been in the hospital. She went in on March 26th, and none of us thought she was not going to leave. And then they ended up doing a scan because she was throwing up a lot of blood, and she had esophageal cancer. So there was a rupture, and the doctor had said, if that ruptured, that would be it. And so we woke her up. I did not want to tell her that she wasn't going to leave the hospital. We kind of had a little internal fight in our family about that, and I personally didn't think she needed to know that. We just wanted to love on her, but kind of lost that battle, and she cried, and I think she knew that she was coming to the end as well. And so then morphine kicks in, because she couldn't talk very well without being very uncomfortable. So we moved her up to the comfort care floor, and they put her on morphine and started weaning her off of everything else. And so I knew that anyone that knows my mom knows that she was, I called her kind of the perfect couturied woman, because she never left the house without makeup. She always dressed to the nines, and she always looked great. Her nails were great. Everything was great. And I thought, okay, well, she'll come back and haunt me if I let her pass in this hospital gown, because it was terrible. So I went and got her these most beautiful Vera Bradley silk, I think they were $200 pajamas, but it didn't matter. Beautiful silk rainbow colored pajamas that she would have loved. And then I had my sister-in-law go to the house and get her nail polish and some things that I knew she would want. And so made sure that her nails looked good and her toes looked good. And and then it just was that evening. Friends coming in to sit by the bed and talk to her, and had gospel music playing. And then it was around 1:48, I think. It's funny how you remember exactly. The song "The Old Rugged Cross" came on.
Oh, nice.
Which was one of her favorite songs. And you're not prepared for that last breath to come. And so it was just me in the room with her. And what I didn't know at the time is that my brothers were in the other room, and my youngest brother, Garrett, had told everyone in the waiting room that he didn't want anyone else to go back into the room, because he didn't think that Mom was going to let go until it was just she and I, because I think she felt the safest with me, and she could just be herself. But the fact that she went to the Old Rugged Cross is really, it was really meaningful. And so she passed, and you just aren't prepared for it. And then the nurses come in, and they asked if I wanted to help give her final bath, and I did. And then the funeral home comes, and for that 11 months prior, I was in 24/7 caretaking mode. So I really didn't know what to do with myself, because I walked her all the way down to the funeral hearse, and they put her in, and then I think I broke. I just broke down, and I literally sat, Ellen, at that hospital for 6 hours in a chair, because I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know, I didn't have anything to do anymore. Right. And so I just want to encourage people that, the feedback has been really good about the podcast. And last week's episode, the feedback has been really great because the whole point of doing this is to share our experiences and to know that we're not alone and that we go through this because it's the journey of life. You know, I don't think any of us get out of here without pain and any of us get out of here without loss.
Right.
It is a journey of highs and lows. And so we're here today, and I just encourage everyone to come, go to the website, which is being built. We'll be ready next week, and listen to Fishbowl Radio Network. You can go and catch some of our episodes on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. And and so I think with it being Good Friday, and literally this was the day that Mom passed away, it's been a range of emotions today.
Yeah, I bet.
I cried once, which is okay. Normally, I remember, 3 or 4 years in, I was worse. And people, you just don't have an idea of the cyclicality of when you're going to feel more unstable than other years. There's no real rhyme or reasons. The first year of everything was terrible because it was the first Christmas, the first, everything. And then, the one thing I'm really going to miss on Sunday is she made the best homemade potato salad. And she only made it at Christmas and Easter. And I should have learned how to make that. So I would encourage everyone listening that if you are blessed enough to have your mom or your dad, take videos of them, get the recipes of the things that you grow up with that you love, because when they're gone, you kind of kick yourself.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember how to do that. So anyway, so shout out to my beautiful mom in heaven, and now my dad's there, and we know what comes on Sunday, and so there's great rejoicing for that. If you are a believer in the Christian faith, however, you do not have to be to listen to this podcast. We want everyone to come, and we welcome everyone. And so whatever power, whatever practice that you do, we want you to come and join us. So with that being said, if you didn't hear our interview last week with Alan, we really went through your story of childhood, baseball, some incredible coaches that you had that helped you when you had I don't even know if I want to call it, I guess just kind of like the teenage kind of getting in trouble.
Yeah, angsty.
Yeah, and just you're growing, and frustration and anxiety and all that stuff. But you had a great college experience. You ended up winning a championship. You had an amazing coach that believed in you. Yeah. And then you decided to get your clinical psychology degree, and you are a counselor for, you do behavioral health counseling.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it a focus on addiction?
Well, I have a couple, what you would call like niche, where I've spent a lot of time treating 12-step recovery, substance use, and family and friends of alcoholics and addictions is kind of the predominant area that I've gravitated in my 12 years. But I also work with complex bipolar cases and helping with medication compliance with a couple doctors that I've, created relationships with back in California. So, I have a background of working with primary mental health, anywhere from schizophrenia to bipolar disorders all the way to substance use.
Which is hugely prevalent.
Oh, massive. Yeah.
It's massive.
I know we touched on that a little bit last week too.
And talking about, there's kind of a fine line. Having a brother that had a brain injury, getting those meds right, because when those meds are unbalanced, it creates pseudo symptoms of bipolar, and that's always seems to be the first thing they want to diagnose him with. Yeah,
there's buzz diagnosis. Bipolar is a big one. It's kind of one of those where society has kind of latched onto it and created its own definition, which, not to knock anybody, but is almost always an incorrect definition of what bipolar is. Right. And the fact that there are multiple different types, all the way down to unspecified types of bipolar, and the manic swings, hypomanic, and depressive symptoms. So, and then you have things like ADHD, which is another buzz diagnosis, which oftentimes has an incorrect, definition in society. I feel like there's labels, and so we're just going to put them into 3 categories. We're going to put them into bipolar, ADHD, or schizophrenia. Yeah. But I think it's fascinating because I don't know about you, especially working with veterans or addiction, because,
there's people that have had traumatic brain injuries, or they've had lack of oxygen to the brain. They may not have known that it creates pseudo symptoms.
Oh, absolutely.
Like bipolar and schizophrenia, but it's really not that.
Yeah.
At times. So I feel like on the outside, and having come to see people like you my whole life with my brother, that each person has to be treated as an individual.
Yeah, it's case to case.
It's case to case based on them, their symptoms that are being presented, the symptoms, and then how do you find the right medication cocktail for them that's going to work for them.
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes there's a lot of brain injury that is undiagnosed in some people.
Yeah, and I spent a few years early in my career. I worked at the Amen clinics under Dr.
Yes.
Daniel Amen, and they do, for those who don't know, they do the brain SPECT imaging.
That's right.
With the blood flow in the brain, and so you get to see anywhere from famous actors, actresses, singers to people who are playing in the NFL, and we've talked about that off the air. I mean, the NFL, the rates of traumatic brain injury are insane, and it does masquerade as mental health symptoms, and I think they're doing some really special work there at the Amen clinics, and
Where are they based?
Well, they have when I was there, almost 10 years ago, they had 6 locations nationwide, but the corporate office is in Costa Mesa, California.
Okay. Yeah, because it's really there's a whole new, and maybe it's not so new. I think it's more becoming more talked about. Is that there's literally technology that you can remap the brain. That there's a whole protocol where CAPS, like Lee Steinberg, who I'm very blessed to know out in LA, Jerry Maguire, has gone to several of these brain institutes where he had a really bad alcohol addiction and almost died and had to step away from his agency for a long time. But he's now on this road to longevity recovery. And has gone in where you put caps on, and there's electrodes, and there's a whole mapping where they've taken a SPECT scan of the brain, and you see the red where there's a deficiency, and then over a 3-month program they do it again, and it's like they've diminished the red down to nothing, and they've helped help people that couldn't read, or help people that had a lot of serious anger issues. They've remapped that brain so they have hope. That more longevity, and a lot of those symptoms aren't present anymore. So I think technology is pretty amazing. Yeah,
there's quite a mix these days of the cutting edge technologies that are being utilized for treatment with the basics like supplements and eating properly and drinking enough water, and the blood. It's like, I'm not an expert in neuroscience, but a huge problem with blood flow in the brain is because you're dehydrated. Yeah, that's a big one.
I should have brought my GTX Organics up here. Did you drink one this week?
Yeah, I drank multiple. It was good. Yeah, I actually did feel more hydrated.
Yeah, that's the number one thing is the hydration factor. Did you sleep better?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I sleep pretty well overall, but I didn't notice anything.
You just felt more hydrated.
Yeah, I felt more hydrated. I didn't. It was easy to put it in the routine.
Totally. One a day. Just one a day. So we're talking about GTX Organics, Dr. Norbert. I know when I had my interview with Sammy, and that's something that we'll be introducing into the show. It's very exciting. It's fulvic, FULVIC, fulvic acid from planet Earth, and humic, HUMIC, acid from planet Earth, comes together and creates the perfect hydration answer. More than anything on the market, and there's nothing in it except those 2 mineral compounds. So when you add that in one a day to the body, we're mineralizing the body when we're not getting minerals in our food anymore. So 15 milligrams of one apple in 2004, you got 15 milligrams from one. Today you have to eat 12. So when you start multiplying and compounding how much more we have to eat to get those minerals, and realize how deficient we are. But the hydration factor is everything. It controls so much in the body, from fatigue to hunger, false hunger, and sleeping and everything. So that's fun. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
So let's talk a little bit about, let's say that we have a veteran who, and let me back up. So when you have either a brain injury or you have someone that has experienced a lot of trauma, it's what you call masking. You're masking it with something. You're trying to fill that hole with something. And sometimes alcohol and drugs or sex is the answer, because they just don't want to feel the reality of what they're feeling. So they try to mask it or self-medicate with something else. So I know similar to the athletes, when they get out of the professional world, everything just stops. There's no more lights, there's no more crowds, there's no more asking for your autographs. You're in your house by yourself. It's over.
Yeah, which, those things, as wonderful as they are, they're fun and exciting. That's not reality.
It's not reality.
Yeah.
But then you also have veterans. So I always say what Jay Glazier and Nate Boyer have created, the merging vets and players, where you take a veteran who's come out very regimented, everything is regimented for you. You're in combat, whatever that may be. You come back. I just don't, we don't do well in America. I don't know about other countries about integrating veterans back into the community. It's a very difficult journey for them.
Yeah.
And I think athletes too, because this is all they've known. Now it's sort of like, now what am I going to do?
Yeah. Athletes, Hollywood,
Right.
anybody who lives out of the ordinary type of structure.
Right.
Once it's done, the transition's really difficult. And, what's interesting is you would think that there would need to be some kind of invention of a program or set of rules or structures, guidelines that people would spend millions of dollars if it said, hey, we'll give you the structure that'll help you experience peace, except for you can get it for free on every corner in a 12-step meeting and a free cup of coffee with it. And that's like when I get people who come in who are ex-athletes, even pro athletes, or people in Hollywood. I have quite a few on my caseload currently that are in Hollywood, whether they're talent agents or they're on shows that we watch and things, and they're 12-steppers. And a big part of what you were touching on is that transition, of like, what do I do when I don't get the show and now I don't know what to do with myself? Well, a lot of them turn to substances.
That's right.
Over-sexualized behaviors, illicit drugs,
Let's look at Matthew
medications.
Perry, great example. And us on the outside, we didn't know the depth, which he was. I mean, we're talking about, I forget how many pills a day.
Yeah.
At one point, I think he said 28.
Yeah.
Oxycontins a day.
Oh, well, he had infinite resources. That's another aspect too. When you see like professional athletes who get big signing bonuses, or they've made it past arbitration and now they're making a ton of money, or somebody
they have
lands
the
a show.
resources.
Yeah, they
could get anything they
anywhere,
want.
anytime, and they're in the land of anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, and I think also then it also comes down to, especially for men, I would think, and you can concur to this, that when we go back to grief, men grieve differently than women.
Slightly, yeah.
Slightly. It's more of that bravado, I can't show my emotion, I can't cry kind of thing. I have to be strong for everybody else.
Yeah.
And forgetting to put the oxygen mask on themselves.
Well, you see a lot of that these days too, where it's like everybody is pushing for some kind of old age stoicism. And I like stoicism. I think it's a principle that any human being, would benefit from learning, just like any philosophical principle.
Yeah.
But to use that as a blanket to not feel, and you see a lot of young dudes doing that. There's like this surge in social media. You see it a lot around mental health of like Marcus Aurelius and his book, on meditations, and phenomenal literature, not how you should be prioritizing exactly how to live your life in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think that there's too much of a cliquish, if this works for you, there's a desperation within people to find the fix.
Yeah.
There's a desperation within people to find the fix that they want, it the quick fix, because that's what we're used to in this country.
Yeah.
We don't want to go through the hard work.
Yeah.
We want the fix.
Right. And so there's a balance in that, right? Because I guess what I'll say on that other point is like the tenets philosophically of like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Marcus Aurelius, these principles are good for humans. They're good for men, right? But it's what you were touching on with grief and loss, the blanket approach to our emotional experiences.
That it can fix everything.
Yeah.
It can.
Yeah.
That's where you come in,
right,
to kind of give people, because I would anticipate, because I used to go to counseling a lot after Mom passed away. I was just had a lot of trauma, and I just couldn't break it down myself. And I was shocked about that, because I always broke everything down myself and considered myself, but I just didn't have the tools to do it, because it was so overwhelmingly painful for me.
Yeah.
And I felt stuck. So I needed somebody to come in and let's break it down piece by piece. And I think that's where the power of therapy is so important. And I applaud people like Michael Phelps and, who came out, with his promoting the counseling site online, because for these heroes to come out and what's her name, the most decorated Olympian, that the black girl,
oh yeah, the gymnastics.
Yeah, I just can't think of her name right now.
But
And then the tennis player, the Asian tennis player that came out and said, I have to quit the game for my own mental health right now. So I think it's nice in 2022, 23, 24, especially coming out of the pandemic, that therapy is okay. It's not a bad word.
In a way, it's interesting, right? I was talking on one of my episodes a couple weeks ago about how the stigma on a media level has seemed to decrease, but in a sense, it's gotten kind of mainstream. And anytime something becomes mainstream, the stigma is still there, right, on the ground. And so, it's now is weaponized in some sectors, which is really unfortunate to see, where it's like I'll kind of plan it like this. In my practice, I'm all about accountability and responsibility, not just for the way that we feel, but especially the way that we behave.
Right.
And we see a lot of that in society today, where people use the mask of mental health as a buzzword to not take accountability for their behaviors. And
to kind of just create a blame game that it's a mental health issue. It's not.
Yeah.
So I can put it into this bucket and call it this without taking the accountability and the responsibility, because people, that's uncomfortable. Yeah.
The way I put it to my clients is like, I'm not going to go around and talk to everybody I see about the fact that I'm in therapy. It's a confidential process. So why do we see it so much? And I've never been of the mindset.
Why do we see people talking about it so much?
Or the way they talk about it, I was talking with my client about self-diagnosis, right? Which is when anytime a client in my 12 years has ever come to me and told me what the diagnosis is, they've been extremely difficult to treat.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. But when they come in and they're open-minded, they don't know the information, but they want to see themselves and they're open to the discussion, they're extremely easy to treat.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that brings up a good point. It's kind of similar with grief in a way.
Yeah.
It's the art of acceptance. What's the first step? Admitting that you have a problem. Right. And then what's the second step? It's
came to believe
that. Yeah. So you can't get to step 3, 4, and 5 until you admit step 1. So I think that's the same thing with grief, right? I'm a member of a lot of private grief groups, and it's interesting reading certain people that you see coming back, and they're not advancing. They're staying in that screaming out desperation, I can't do this anymore kind of thing. And then you're like, okay, now do we have a suicidal thing on our hands, or do we, as an administrator, or is it just crying out for help because you just need somebody to listen? Right. So I think that's where you've gone to school and got your certifications, because you probably know by talking to someone for less than 30 minutes, kind of if they're in that acceptance.
Yeah. I would say within the first 5 to 10 minutes of an assessment, I can tell, does this person actually want to do the work to better themselves, or is this so they can say they're going to therapy?
To satisfy somebody else.
Yeah, typically. Yeah, to get someone off their back, or to be able to post it on social media, or to tell their significant other, see, look, I'm trying, or or a couple that comes in and they want just the plaque on the wall that says they went to therapy, but they were actually going to get divorced anyway. I've seen it all.
Yeah, I bet you have. Yeah. What would you say if you are looking at drugs, alcohol, sex, and then there's also a financial disease of spending?
Yeah, Debtors Anonymous.
Yeah. Coming out of COVID, what were you seeing as kind of the primary, or was it all of them?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a surge in any type of addictive behavior when you have a ramping up of isolation. And that's been the biggest problem, I would say, underlying in the increase of all of these things in the last 20 years in our society is an increase in isolation and a steady increase in substance use, and simultaneously a decrease in lasting marriages, a decrease in people getting married, a decrease in people having kids, an increase in divorce. You know, it's like all of the aspects that are leading to isolation are increasing because we have such access on our phones. So like, you know, I don't even have to go to the grocery store anymore if I don't want to. They'll deliver it to my front door. Yeah.
Everyone comes to me now.
Yeah. It's why, like, you know, I'll go to the grocery store and, you know, I enjoy getting out of the house.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I like shopping for my own groceries. I don't want someone shopping for my own groceries.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that Grubhub
like
stuff.
My food
yeah, no thanks.
I don't understand if any of you do this, then I apologize in advance, but I don't understand anybody that orders DoorDash or Grubhub with Taco Bell. Because I've gotten my Taco Bell, taco, and literally just getting it a mile and a half to my house, it's soggy.
Yeah.
So when I run a really good, fully fresh Taco Bell taco, which I love, I go in because it tastes completely different.
Right. Which then
increase 2 seconds off the grill. Yeah.
Right. Which I saw the scene where it's like, which then increased the number of negative reviews on Yelp for not fresh food.
It was horrible.
But it's like, yeah, of course your food's not fresh because you had to have someone bring it to your house.
I see Taco Bell when I see this. I'm like, who's Grubhubbing Taco Bell?
Yeah.
And then I was at 7-Eleven the other day and I saw this Grubhub guy come in and I'm like looking around going, who is Grubhubbing at 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
And he's like, you'd be shocked. Like, we're in here getting whatever. I mean, you get whatever. Yeah. And I was like, wow, it's crazy. Like, I don't do that. I want to go get my own stuff.
Yeah, and there'll always be a percentage of people who don't do those things. But, you know, there's an ever increasing, you know, percentage of people who live their life solely online. And that's a huge problem in Japan. You know, I forget the name of what they call the gentlemen who like literally never leave their house. Like where there's like an increasing percentage of dudes in Japan who like haven't even left their house in like 3 years, not even walked out the front door.
What?
Yeah, there's a term for it. It's escaping me.
Is it a phobia?
No, it's not a phobia. There's no reason. They have AI girlfriends. You know, there's that whole thing where like now it's like you can have an artificial intelligent girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever you're into, and it'll talk to you, and you know, and they play video games all day, and they do their equivalent of DoorDash, and there's a specific term, and we're seeing what's happened in Japan happen here. First, it was a decrease in marriage and a decrease in having kids, and then it was total isolation and things like suicide and substance use and increasing like sexual frivolousness. So the ones that are going, Japan has a huge problem with like solicited sex problems, like hookers essentially. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but but and we see that increasing here in America too. So you know, and especially when people talk about it online, it gets real hyperbolic. And I'm not a fan of that either, where it's like all men are like this or all women.
No,
because it divides people. And the reality is umbrella statements never work because people are vastly unique.
It's like our politics. We put people in a red box or a blue box.
Right.
And no, I'd never heard that about people in Japan. I can't even imagine not leaving your house in 3 years.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's a massive percentage of like boys from the age, or men from the ages of like 18 to 50. And so it's like right in the prime of where they would be out.
So no marriages, no children.
Yeah.
Wow, I wonder what the percentage of that, if there's been a focus, like how many of them have a mental illness and then commit suicide.
Yeah, well, that's the increasing percentage. And anytime you see anything related to isolation, it's why in substance use you see a huge percentage of suicidality. Right? Anytime you see isolation, suicide, depressive symptoms sharply increase, especially in men.
That's so wild. I don't understand these AI girlfriends and all. I mean,
it's wild. Yeah.
Crazy.
I don't get it either.
I remember one of my favorite films, and it was out there. It was Ryan Gosling, Lars and the Real Girl.
Oh, yeah.
And he had the blow-up doll that became his girlfriend and the family. And, you know, it was a pseudo-comedy, but there are people that do that.
Yeah, well, there's that really creepy one with Joaquin Phoenix called Her.
Oh, God. No, that.
Yeah, where he just talks to her.
Yeah, it was very strange.
That's really
what's happening.
That's what's happening.
That's crazy.
And it's not too long from being in America. I mean, with artificial intelligence, it really, like, who's to say where exactly it started? But Japan really has been using it for a lot of years, so they're ahead of us in a lot of this stuff.
Well, then I wonder. So, and this is kind of off topic, but I get fascinated by that because then I wonder when you're thinking about looking at longevity of societal things in that country. Having no marriages, no kids, That seems quite interesting that in Japan there's going to be a real tipping point of a different societal makeup if you're not having children and dads and things like that. So what does all that end up being? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's like we have plenty of history lessons on that, but I think a really important one is look at Soviet Russia, where they weren't allowed to do those things,
right.
And thrown in prisons, and they had the longest standing concentration camps out of any nation on this planet, and the way that they've treated their society is quite atrocious, and it's quote unquote better now in 2024, but that's just what they tell us.
That's what they want. Propaganda.
Prison camps still exist in Soviet Russia today, but what's wild is like you look at what happened. It's like you're subjecting yourself to totalitarianism, really. It's like people, when a society isn't creating their own, let's just say like the equivalent of living on a ranch and having a big family, right? Where you believe in your morals and values, and you believe in a power greater than yourself that's like a telos, something off in the distance that I can strive to be better than.
Right.
If a society doesn't have that and a lot of people doing those things, then human beings take total power. And it's really easy to manipulate separated societies. So like if somebody doesn't have a connection to their family or a reason to honor their parents, it's like, well, who are they still are human. They want to be a part of something.
Right.
What are they going to turn to? The government. And we've seen that in Russia. We saw it in Germany, and what happened in Germany in the 1940s.
Yeah, oh my God.
I mean, and leading up to the 1940s is precisely what was happening, that people wanted to fit in and they looked to the government. And it's like we got to read our history.
Real bad. Yeah, and I think that brings up just the whole thing about, when you talk about grief for a moment, I have a couple really good friends playing the NFL that have retired, but we were talking about the cancel culture.
Oh yeah.
Of the Robert E. Lee, which Robert Lee wasn't a good guy, but he is historical. And then when they took they took the statue down in New Orleans on the square, and they're taking all these statues down and they're renaming these schools. I mean, I understand to a degree, but I also think about, what Florida's doing is just ridiculous, where they're like, they closed every diversity office, and there's and pulling these books out, and To Kill a Mockingbird's gone, and all these books, because that didn't happen. Yeah, in their minds, that did not happen.
Well, they want it to not happen, and let's think about
right. They want it to not happen, but it's because they don't want to teach it, because they don't want people to know. But that is history. So when you are doing that, I feel like you're creating a monster.
Well, in a sovereign country, a free country, anytime you start limiting literature, that's the beginning of really big downfall.
That's the beginning of what happened in Germany.
Yeah, and in Russia. You can't read this. Screw you, I'm going to read this.
Right.
Period. End of story. If I can't get it from you, I'm going to buy it from somebody's garage.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's really freaky. It's kind of freaky. And I think, so going back to the grief conversation, when I was talking to one of my player friends the other day, he was talking about, as a black man and raising his family, that he just says there's a level of grief within me because of what's happening in America. Like, it feels like, the Selma Bridge, we marched for voting rights, and then what we're seeing some of these southern states doing is taking us back 60 years. Like, just trying to erase the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And pretending like, sorry, we're going to take you back here. You're not going to do that anymore. And he said it's very depressing, and it's causing him to feel depression, and it's causing him to feel sadness and out of control, because they don't have control over it. You only can have control what you do. So there's literally some people that are telling athletes, don't go to Florida schools, don't take scholarships at University of Florida anymore because of what's happening there. And it's really strange. Yeah, it's really strange. And you do have these polarizations of kind of a brainwashing type mentality, that if you don't believe the way I believe, you're flawed.
Yeah.
Like, you're flawed. There's no disagreeing and go, hey, Alan, I don't really agree with that.
Right.
But I love you and I respect you, and we're just going to agree to disagree on that. But I'm not going to rip your nose off because you don't believe what I believe. Right. And then I'm canceling you out and calling you names and like you're the worst thing on the planet. But I see people doing that every day, and it's really scary to me.
Yeah, and I think the reality of that, taking a neutral position as a therapist, is that's always, when I see situations like that, people not willing to listen to each other but quick to fight on topics, that's always a sign of unresolved resentments. It has nothing to do with that other person.
Right.
When you can't find common ground with a person, that doesn't have anything to do with the other person's point of view. That has everything to do with what's unresolved in here.
Absolutely. And they're just never going to bend on that. So going back to,
it would be a loss if they did.
Yeah. Right. So going back to, we have obviously an opioid and fentanyl crisis in this country. Massive. And you've got people that are abusing both alcohol and the opioids. I think something that was fascinating that came up last week in another discussion of a guy that was a veteran, that the Army was giving him opioids to get better, and pretty much making him addicted. And knowing that I'm giving you all these cocktails of drugs, and then just taking him away from him, like, go, your discharge, go back home, and like he's become an addict. Yeah,
the biggest boom we saw in our country, and not to say that it was the only time, but one of the biggest booms prior to this era was after the Vietnam War. They were getting access to so much opiates through their like chain of command, even, and being encouraged to
take it.
I mean they were getting messed up over there, and they had to keep fighting. So it was like, hey, well, they produce it here, go get it. And then it came back. And that was one of the first big booms. But one of the problems we face today is like, ever since the legalization of marijuana in a lot of states, we've actually seen a rise directly correlated in fentanyl increases, because now what we thought, like, and I don't necessarily disagree with this premise across the board, but when you legalize a substance that was initially illicit, the hope is that things like the cartel, will have a harder time gaining a foothold. The problem is they had an easier time gaining a foothold, and then they could push the harder drugs, which made it easier for them to recruit. And so now fentanyl is being pushed, and it's in marijuana that kids are smoking in those little vape pens. Not to fear monger,
they're putting them in it. They're putting it in there intentionally
to get them hooked. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's extremely addictive. I don't know if it's more addictive than opiates. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but it's as addictive.
And I think it's as addictive, if not more, than heroin.
Well, and the biggest problem with fentanyl is that it's direct poison to the body. And so you don't need a whole lot of it. You're going to die.
That's right. So these pills that are laced that are too much. And I mean, it's just it's a crazy journey. And I think, do you see in your profession, you see people that are, okay, I'm not going to be a police officer because of this. I'm not going to be a fireman because of this, or I'm not going to, whatever. But do you see, like, I've always heard that we have a need for a lot more people doing what you're doing in our country, especially after COVID, that we have a gap in the number of people that are helping those with addictions and mental health and behavioral health crisis, that we don't have enough people.
Well, there's always been a gap. If you look at, like, psychology hasn't been around that long as a practice, as like a discipline. I mean, we're talking about Freud was really the spearhead who started all of it, and that's not that long ago. That's the early 1900s, and people have always been humanly sick, which is, we all are in our own ways as part of being a fallen culture, right? But it's much more prevalent in the discussion. And so I think we will see a boom in people wanting to do this work, but that's also where it's kind of like, we saw a boom in McDonald's. Did that turn out that great?
No.
They used to make phenomenal burgers for 25 cents. Now it's like you pay $15 and get a burger that
we don't even
might
know
as well
what
be
the
cardboard.
heck is in it.
Yeah.
We don't know what's in it.
I'm a purist in my field. I'm never going to sit here and say that I'm the best clinician, in the world, because I know I could list off 10 of them that I love to follow that are much more brilliant than me. But I do think that there's something when it starts to become a push, the scrutiny of like getting into the field decreases to get a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And that's not the worst thing in the world. But I am a purist in that sense of like, is it really helping at that point?
Yeah. So if somebody's listening and they're thinking about a career change, or
Yeah.
they find that they have a heart for something like this. Like,
Yeah.
what is the steps to somebody to follow in the path to become a clinical psychologist, right?
Yeah. So at a base, you need a master's degree.
Okay.
If you are really passionate about it, I would recommend getting into an accredited program that's been around for a long time. If you're just starting out and you really, really want to do it, like you're serious about making a shift, I wouldn't do the online programs for your master's program. I would get in person and learn from the people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years. I mean,
and a master's in the psychology,
in
right?
clinical psychology,
Okay.
or you could do social work or LPCC. There's a lot of different programs depending on the state that you're in.
Right.
I'm from California, which is where I did my master's
Right.
in Southern California, and it was an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist. But I've worked with you know any type of
And
professional.
did you have a residency as well in your, like a residency where you were seeing patients and people like would sit in and help,
Yeah.
like they were over, like kind of grading you or on everything?
Yeah. So in my doctorate, we call those like residencies,
Okay.
but in my master's, it's we call it well, now they call them associates. But the predominant work is in your internship and your master's level.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you're in school and starting practicing, you have to record your sessions and then show them to your classmates and your professors,
Oh,
and
wow.
that is nerve-wracking.
I bet so.
Yeah.
I bet so. And then are people taking notes and like?
Oh yeah, and ripping you apart. Yeah.
Oh, are they really?
Hey, you shouldn't have said this, or why'd you say that, or like, what are you getting at there? And I don't know. This is my second week doing this. I have no idea.
like I don't know.
Yeah.
I bet that was really fascinating
Yeah.
though, when you kind
Learned a
of take
lot.
a step back. Well, you want to talk about figuring out people's personalities real quick, how they receive information. I bet
Yeah.
that was crazy.
Oh yeah, it's hard. Yeah, you know, and I was young when I went in. I was 21 years old when I started my master's.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah, I was a kid and I was fresh off a
And
baseball
did you get your
field.
doctorate as well?
I'm currently finishing it right now.
Wow.
I'm almost done with my dissertation.
Is that a 4-year?
It can be. I've took longer.
Wow.
Just because I haven't been in a rush, and you know
Yeah.
your dissertation you're at your own pace, and
And are you because is it one subject that you have a dissertation on
Yeah.
that's what you got to stick with?
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I've been studying the correlation on. Well, essentially, my dissertation is on the necessary time for your brain to heal after you've stopped using substances. So 36 months is the general accepted time frame in the brain disease model that shows that after 36 months, your brain is finally pretty much past
That's
the effects.
interesting.
Yeah, and so, but in our society, treatment centers, you're lucky to get 30, 60, 90 days, and we're talking about 36 months for
You're
your brain to
getting
heal.
like sometimes 2 weeks, and then
Yeah.
they kick you out. He's
Yeah.
ready. You're like, no.
Right.
And
not
then they
even
just
close.
want to pump you back up with,
Yeah.
you know, I know with my brother and dealing with his medication, we've just had a roller coaster the last couple of years, and they just want to suck him in, get him into groups, write the script,
Yeah.
and then give him more script, go home. And then it's like, what are you really doing?
Yeah. Well, and then you have a real problem in our society with recidivism. You know, so people coming in and out and in and out and in and out of
Yeah.
treatment until it's on the taxpayer, and that's another problem with the war on drugs. You know, like again, I'm not a political guy, right? But there are a lot of political ramifications for those who are interested in those things who are listening. I mean, it's never ending, and there's a need for advocates. I advocate in a different realm, which is for each individual. I do not think that treatment is the answer. I think it's the beginning of a possible solution. I think 12-step recovery is the answer, and that's
smart.
my stance.
That's really fascinating
always.
that you say that.
Yeah.
So you think that you can treat it without medication?
Well, you know, it's again case to case basis.
But some.
Yeah, I think here's my hardline stance as to like just pure substance use recovery. Any substance that's ever been fabricated to get someone to stop using substances has only resulted in needing another 12-step program.
Right.
You know,
Wow.
it's like, look at Xanax. You know, it first bursted on the scene because it was touted to be the substance that stops the alcoholic from drinking. Now it's one of the most abused substances on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, it's like ketamine's not far behind. Ketamine is a new one that's an FDA approved, monitored, and now we're seeing like it's a psychedelic.
You're seeing people that are really
Yeah.
messed up from it.
Yeah, and it's starting and gaining steam the exact same way that Xanax did. right? Which is, oh, well, doctors suggested and it's having such great effects. Yeah, for those who really want it to. But that's the thing too about 12-step recovery is it's not a program for people who need it. It's a program for people who want it.
That's really important.
know?
Oh no, that's so enlightening. I think that's really important. We've got a few more minutes. Tell the audience, people listening, how to find you, and if somebody is interested in setting up a consultation with you to start therapy, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I've got right now. I do have a few slots open. So if you are interested, I'd act quickly because I also just today had 2 of my clients from last year reach back out to get on the caseload.
Yeah.
But you can find me at alanheide.com. That's ALANHEIDE.com. And I have buttons on there to email me to click all over the website to get a consultation. I would suggest just shoot me an email with your number and asking for a consultation. I do 15-minute free consultations if you're interested. And then other than that, you can also find me on YouTube. So if I don't have slots open, but you like some of the information that I talk about or just want access to tools, I upload pretty much every day on my YouTube under Breaking the Cycle.
I love it. What in terms of physical exercise and stuff? Because I think there definitely is a correlation with movement and getting the body going and how you feel with dopamine and everything else. But do you suggest that people, hey, take a 15-minute walk a day or just to try to get your blood moving and because exercise is important.
Yeah, my whole premise, especially let's say someone comes into me, they're really depressed, really anxious. We in the assessment we want to start to figure out, what does your day look like? Are you doing the things that the vast majority of people do, which is get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, and have something fulfilling that you're doing during the day that causes you to create a schedule. If you don't have those things, let's start to get on that. Right. And then we can move into realms like physical exercise. I'm a huge proponent of like the 30-30-30. So, 30 grams of protein in the morning, 30 minutes of exercise within 30 minutes of waking up. And that's not mine. I didn't coin that. I forget the doctor who.
But I think there's proof that helps with longevity of stabilization of that, right?
Yeah, and in regards to just structure in your mental health, it's like the vast majority of people, they're getting up early in the morning at a set time, and they're going to bed at a decent hour at a set time. And if you're outside of those ranges, that's where you see most anxiety and depression is people who don't have structure.
Yeah.
And also people who aren't eating properly.
Right.
So, if you're in a calorie deficit, often you're much higher propensity to experience anxiety. And the longer you stay in an anxious state, the more depressed you're going to feel. And the longer you're depressed, the more severe those symptoms get, the more we're talking about dangerous stuff like suicidality and homicidality.
Yeah. So really there is something to be said for structure and stability. And then this is the nightmare at night, like this thing.
Yeah. I released a video the other day talking about just 4 different types of boundaries, but digital boundaries were on there, and it's a touchy one in today's society, but I talk about it with all my clients.
It's important.
If you're going to spend 5 hours on your phone, then you have to have a boundary there to like, it's only 5 hours and I'm getting off of the phone. I understand in our professions and in our daily life, we have to use technology. That important. Right? We're on technology right now and hoping that people watch, and I get that. And like, hey, maybe the boundary is that you tune in for Kim's show here and then you tune in for mine later and then you get off your phone.
Right. And I also think like one thing I've been trying to do better, because this is not good for you when you, first thing we do, people check it. It's the first thing you do. And they say to discipline yourself to not check it in the morning, like to get up and leave it. But I've been trying to like turn it on silent and putting it away, like on the other side, my nightstand, but on the other side of my book, so that I don't touch it. And then if I wake up in the middle of the night, it's hard because you want to go for it. Mm-hmm. But then sometimes I was getting in the habit where I'm reading news articles. Well, that's not good for me either, because then I'm stimulating my brain. I'm not going to go back to sleep. Yeah,
well, blue lights at night are going to keep you awake.
That's right.
It makes it harder to get into REM sleep. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gosh, this is so much fun. Like I could just do, Alan, you and I should do a show. I'm so excited. Let's just talk a little bit about, because we're about to wrap, with Good Friday. Holidays are very difficult for people in grief. And I just went to my friend Robin's nephew's funeral this week, and he died of a drug overdose, of fentanyl. And I know that the Valitudo family, we've been lifting them up in prayer this week, and it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
What are just a quick couple things that you can help an individual who may not have family or friends that can help them feel a little stability with grief over the next couple days?
Yeah, I was just joking with an agnostic client, who doesn't believe in a higher power. I said, well, maybe you should still try to go to a church and then have someone who believes wash your feet, get a good laugh out of it. But get around people. I love to poke fun in the ways, it's like,
or go get a pedicure.
Yeah, go be around people.
Yeah.
And if that's really difficult, then I would say if you are a spiritual person, turn to your higher power. All right. If you don't have access to a lot of people, I would start to utilize this as an invitation to invite that into your life. My biggest abdication in my clinical practice over the 12 years has been community, community, community. If you're not around people, you're going to be feeling not too good. And so that would be the first place that I start. Or get out, go for a walk, get some fresh air. The last thing you want to do on a holiday, if you're feeling down, sad, and depressed, is just sit in a dark lit room. So get out, get some sunshine.
Take your dog for a walk.
Yeah, if you got a pet, take your pet out. If you got a cat, cuddle with your cat, and then get some sunshine.
And even getting out, go see a movie. If you feel like you don't want to be around people, just go see a movie. Get out and be around people. Yeah, it always does make you feel better.
Yeah, and I'm also a big advocate of take yourself on a date.
Yeah,
go get ice cream, go see a movie, take yourself to dinner. No one's going to judge you.
Right.
Not as hard as you judge yourself. So,
right. Yeah.
Take yourself out and, and if all of those things are out of reach, then truly, truly, truly reach out for therapy, because we got to figure out what's blocking you from doing those things for yourself.
Yeah, that's so important. Well, thank you so much. And your show is coming on Fishbowl Radio Network in an hour. So you are live every Friday from 7 to 8 o'clock.
Correct.
Can find you on your website, YouTube, obviously on Fishbowl Radio Network, and we'll be back next Friday for another edition of Fingerprints of Grief. And you can my Instagram page is almost done, so I'm excited about that.
Nice. And
the website. And if you have any questions or any resources that you are interested in for grief, you can message me on Instagram, Kimmy Franchise, or you can go to Fingerprints of Grief Facebook and send me a DM there. And I do have some resources, and I can also connect you with Alan. So I hope everybody has a safe and blessed holiday weekend. And if you don't celebrate Easter, that's fine. Just know that when you wake up, hey, we're blessed to be alive. And go get some ice cream. I think what Alan says. Ice cream always makes you feel better.
Simple pleasures.
Unless you're lactose intolerant. So, all right. Thank you guys. Have a great night and a good weekend.
Thanks for having me.